We aren't even really into the opening box office weekend for Blue Beetle, the latest attempt for Warner Brothers to make at least some money out of the DCEU before they launched the DCU with James Gunn and Superman Legacy. And people are already arguing about whether or not the movie is successful, basically based off the Thursday preview numbers that have come in. And it gets also confusing because you could tell people are no longer just stating facts and comparing it to like movies and saying this was the trend of that movie. This is likely where it'll end up, you deciders, whenever they're like, yeah, this is what the numbers are, but it doesn't mean what it meant last time. When the last time a movie performed like this, it absolutely bombed and people lost their jobs and people will never be allowed to return as this character in DC movies moving forward because the movie performed so badly. But now because it's Blue Beetle and it's a Latino hero, it means something completely different. And it's pretty ridiculous. Even multiple articles, like from the same website, are stating the same information and coming up with different conclusions about what this means for the movie. Now, what does it ultimately mean? Well, it means that it's trending in a direction that's very similar to Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which probably isn't a good thing because Shazam! Fury of the Gods was a big old bomb. But Blue Beetle actually still has a chance to be successful. It still has a chance to make money. We've only gotten into the first few days of the release of the movie. It's looking for its audience. Will it find it? I'm not really sure. But hey, if the word of mouth is good and people like the character, I imagine eventually it will find that audience. Although, just looking at the early trending on Rotten Tomatoes, it looks like a middling to potentially bad DC Comics movie, unfortunately. Because I'm not rooting against Blue Beetle. I'm not rooting against Jaime Reyes. I might not understand why you would make a standalone Blue Beetle movie starring Jaime Reyes just because of the character and what was available to make with it. And the fact that the DCEU had been failing for so long, why would you go in this direction? Like, if you're like, Wes, well, what character should they use that's not really Batman or Superman for a standalone movie that you think would be cool no matter what? I would be like, I would make a Lobo movie. I would potentially make a Red Hood movie. Although that character obviously is related to Batman, I would maybe do a Huntress movie if you needed a female hero or something like that. But, no offense to Jaime Reyes or Blue Beetle fans. He's just not my first choice because I don't think the character is all that compelling. Although he does have a really cool outfit. And I'll give him this. The makers of the Blue Beetle movie, the outfit looks pretty damn cool. And hopefully that'll bring people in. But it doesn't look like, at least early on. But let's get into some of these weird takes on what is actually happening. And we'll get one that's a little bit less biased. The first one is from Giant Frickin' Robot. The author of this article states DC's newest tentpole, Blue Beetle, has brought in a whopping $3.3 million during previews alone. It is projected to make a minimum of $25 million during its opening weekend, according to Variety. Barbie might be one of the most successful movies of all time, and DC might have a history of disappointing films that yield lackluster financial results, but all that might change if Blue Beetle meets the expectations experts are projecting. Blue Beetle, starring Zolo Mariduena of Cobra Kai fame and directed by Angel Manuel Soto, is shaping up to be more than just another superhero flick. It marks a significant milestone for diversity and representation in the genre, and based on what we've learned from the Barbie craze, breaking barriers and blazing new trails is in right now. That's a whole lot to unwrap there from the author of this Giant Freaking Robot article, which isn't the most reliable source, but this isn't really rumor or speculation. This is actual facts. This is actually trying to present what's actually happening in real time and make sense of it. And you can't really compare Blue Beetle to Barbie. Blue Beetle is like the 50th superhero movie we've gotten over the last decade that's associated with the franchise that has failed so miserably. They're restarting the whole thing that has done nothing but lose money for the last 4 or 5 years or so. Whenever Aquaman came out, that's the last time they really made a good sizable chunk of change based on DC characters outside of Batman. Obviously, you had the Batman. Batman's a different animal. So you can't really compare Blue Beetle to Barbie. Barbie is something that's pretty unique. It's new. It's something we'd never really seen with a girl's toy property, and it really blew up, and obviously it has a lot of people that really enjoy the movie. So they're trying to make comparisons to things that don't even make sense because Blue Beetle isn't associated with diversity and representation and blazing new trails. It's associated with Shazam. It's associated with Flash. It's associated with a bunch of really bad DC character movies. And that's kind of the point of view that the movie is actually coming from, whether the filmmakers or the studio want that or not. You get that kind of legacy associated with the character, because it still says DC Films, it still says Warner Brothers, and everyone knows where it's coming from. And then the number itself that they're talking about there, $3.3 million in previews, suggests that it might make upwards of $25 million total on opening weekend. And this is the makings of a new tentpole. $25 million is less than what Shazam! Fury of the Gods did. $25 million is significantly less than what Black Adam did. $25 million is significantly less than what The Flash did. And while the budget is lower for Blue Beetle, it ain't that much lower. The movie still cost $120 million to make. So they have a lot of work to do just to become profitable, let alone start a franchise on here. And this, like, the author of this article is absolutely living in fucking Candyland, because the numbers are there. There are comparable properties to it. We've seen what's happened, and we kind of know where this is heading, at least early on. Hopefully it defies expectations and ends up blowing up and finding an audience and everyone loves the movie. But based on what we know right now, this ain't no tentpole. It's no franchise starter. It's another loss leader for Warner Brothers and the DCEU as James Gunn tries to get some momentum and excitement for the DCU as we get the last remnants, of that failed franchise. Obviously, the last one's going to be Aquaman and Lost Kingdom, which made $1 billion the first time out. We'll see what the sequel does. That's really their last chance to make money. There's another interesting take from comingsoon.net. Blue Beetle earned the lowest Thursday night previews of any DC movie in 2023 at the box office. 2023 has not been the strongest year for DC commercially. Their first two superhero movies, Shazam! Fury of the Gods and The Flash, both bombed at the box office. The Flash, which cost between $200 and $220 million to make, is now estimated to be one of the biggest box office bombs of all time. However, Blue Beetle earned $3.3 million in Thursday night previews at the box office, which is lower than the previews for Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which earned $3.4 million, and The Flash, which earned $9.7 million. Blue Beetle is currently tracking to make between $25 and $32 million in its opening weekend, which would put it on par for Shazam 2's $30 million opening. So as you can see, there's a big difference between there, because that article is actually providing context for what this $3.3 million in projected $25 to $32 million opening actually means when you start comparing it to like movies, other movies from the DC franchise, other movies featuring superheroes and stuff like that. And it's not looking good. And Deadline.com has been going out of their way to try and champion this movie and say, it's got a lot of strong word of mouth. We're expecting lots of people to be walking up, and they've been pushing forward the projected box office of the movie. And I think one time it got up to like $35 million maybe on opening weekend, which would be slightly more than Shazam! Fury of the Gods and certainly an improvement. But now, after they've seen the opening previews and they've seen the advanced ticket sales, Deadline have dropped their projection back down to $25 million, which is the low end that people were working with coming in this weekend. So there's actually a good chance that it's going to come in significantly less than Shazam! Fury of the Gods. So whether you like the movie or not, or you think it's a good movie and you really like Jaime Reyes and you think this is a really good interpretation of Blue Beetle and it's groundbreaking stuff and it's blazing new trail, it appears, at least initially, that this thing is actually bombing worse than Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which didn't make money, which actually lost money. And that is not a good place to be. And I understand people want to champion the movie. They want to go out there and they say, this is the first big DC movie fronted by a Latino hero. Let's get some support for the movie and maybe we can get the communities out there to support it or whatever. But it's all AstroTurf at this point, because it appears that none of that really ended up playing out because people just aren't really interested in the DCEU right now. And the fact that there was a Latino hero wasn't enough to get people excited for the movie. And it certainly didn't help that the director was out there saying everything that he could to make people think this is the same old when it comes to modern entertainment or whatever. If you remember earlier, I was talking about the giant freaking robot article praising this movie, and it's a new tentpole. This is blazing a new trail. It's blowing up, with its projected $25 million opening weekend. The same website has this article. Despite high praise from critics' first reviews and early predictions suggesting Blue Beetle would be performing well at the box office, the new DC film seems to be opening to empty movie theaters. Though the film's budget is significantly lower than other recent DC outings such as Shazam! Fury of the Gods and The Flash, these empty theaters seem to be putting fans and studio heads alike on edge, fearing that the film could potentially bomb. So you have the same website, And I understand you have different points of view from the author itself, but you do have to have some editorial oversight to say, is it blowing up and is it a tentpole now or is it dying? Because these two articles were released within 24 hours of each other and things don't move quite that fast. And it's pretty crazy that there's no like adult in the room to say, okay, we can't quite go that far if it's actually projecting to make less than Shazam Fury of the Gods, which already bombed in 2023. And then in the second article, when they're talking about the empty seats, they say it has a significantly lower budget than Shazam Fury of the Gods and The Flash. While it certainly does have a significantly lower budget than The Flash, which was $220 million for The Flash, and then for Blue Beetle, it's $120 million reported. The reported budget for Shazam Fury of the Gods is $125 million. And it appears that this movie is actually going to make $5 million less on the opening weekend as well. So everything is actually trending in a very bad direction. And yes, if you go to that article, you will see lots of people on social media saying, hey, I went to go buy some seats to go see Blue Beetle on Friday or Saturday, and I'm the only one buying seats. Or there's one person that had a seat purchase. Or maybe there was 3 or 4 people. And this doesn't say anything bad about Zolo Maridueña and his star power, which I don't think he really has any. You know, he's the guy from Cobra Kai or whatever. I don't think this has anything to do with him. I don't think it has anything to do with having a Latino superhero. It has everything to do with the fact that Blue Beetle is associated with a dead movie franchise that's already dead, and they're just waiting to reboot it. So why go and invest in this character, this actor, this universe, this film? And it's really nobody's fault. It's not like it's Deadline's fault because they went out there and championed it and tried to make it bigger than it was. It's not the author of the first article's fault for trying to make it seem like it's bigger than it is, but you have to take the facts for what they are. It hasn't gone well for Blue Beetle, at least early on, and all tracking indicates that it's likely to be another enormous bomb for DC Films before the DCU launches with Superman Legacy. It sucks. I hope the movie's good. I love DC heroes. I love the DC universe, and I hope people like this movie, and it's a good interpretation of Blue Beetle. And it turns out that the director is just a blowhard that wasn't saying anything really material to the film itself and the portrayal of the heroes and whether or not it's a good film. I hope that in spite of its very weak opening that actually projects that it's going to make less than Shazam Fury of the Gods and portends that it's going to be a big flop, that it finds an audience and people like the movie. I'm not championing or hoping Blue Beetle fails here, but when you have facts and you have hard concrete data that projects a certain thing is happening, you kind of just have to understand what it is, understand what it means, and it doesn't mean that this is a new tentpole. It doesn't mean that it's blazing a new trail, and it certainly doesn't mean that it's blowing up. Yes, it's going to perform better than Barbie on its 5th week. That's not exactly like an enormous achievement. You know what I mean? The movie's been out for over a month. It's going to do better than Barbie after Barbie's already made $1.2 billion or something like that. Speaking of Barbie, the good thing about that movie is perhaps Hollywood finally found that new audience they've been searching for so many years. If you haven't seen this, this is what Aaron and I had to say about Barbie and our hopes for the future of the franchise and all these other girl empowerment movies. There's also a link in the video description.